The first thing I noticed was the empty shelf. It was a Tuesday morning, a little after 9. I had made coffee and carried it into the den the way I had for years. The sun was coming through the blinds in those thin stripes that make every speck of dust look important. I sat down. Something felt wrong. For almost 40 years, my husband Paul's woodworking books had filled the bottom shelf beside the fireplace. There were 12 of them, maybe 13. I never counted. Some had cracked spines. A few smelled faintly like sawdust because Paul used to carry them into the garage with him. One had a coffee stain across the cover. Another had his handwriting in the margins. Now the shelf was empty. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I called my son Mark. He answered on the third ring. "Morning, Mom." "Mark, where are your father's books?" There was a small pause. "Oh, those?" "Yes, those. I took them to the donation center yesterday." I looked at the empty shelf again. "You did what?" "They were old, Mom. You never used them." That sentence stayed with me. You never used them. As if usefulness was the only reason something deserved to remain in a house. "Why didn't you ask me? I thought we already went through that shelf." "We didn't." Another pause. "Well, I'm sorry. I honestly thought we had." I closed my eyes. "Can you get them back?" "I don't think so." "Did you even ask?" "Mom, they went into the donation drop. They're probably already sorted." I didn't say anything. Mark sighed. "I should have asked. I'm sorry." I knew he meant it. That almost made it harder. At the time, I thought the problem was simple. My son had thrown away something that wasn't his. I didn't understand yet that the books were only the beginning. My name is Helen Carter. I'm 76 years old, and I spent 34 years teaching elementary school outside Columbus, Ohio. I retired 12 years ago. My husband Paul died 4 years ago after a short illness. We had been married 51 years. Since then, I've lived alone in the same 2-story house where we raised our son. People often ask whether the house feels too big. It does sometimes, especially at night. There are rooms I barely enter anymore. The upstairs bathroom still has a drawer filled with things nobody needs. The basement has Christmas decorations from years when I still had enough energy to decorate every railing. There are dishes in the dining room cabinet I haven't touched since Paul's last Thanksgiving. And the yard is more work than I like admitting. Last spring, I paid someone to trim the hedges for the first time. I told Mark it was because I didn't feel like doing it. The truth was that my hands hurt for 2 days after I tried. So when Mark first offered to help me clear things out, I was grateful, truly grateful. He works as a building contractor. He likes order. He can look at a garage full of nonsense and somehow see shelves, categories, and a plan. I look at the same garage and remember Paul's workbench. That is the difference between us. The Saturday before I noticed the missing books, Mark had come over with boxes in the back of his truck. Large brown boxes. He carried them inside and lined them against the dining room wall. Each one had a label written in thick black marker. Keep, donate, trash. He stepped back and looked at them like he'd built something. "There," he said. "This will make it easier." I smiled. "That looks very official." He laughed. "You know me." I did know him. Mark had always been practical. When he was 10, he organized his baseball cards by team. When he was 16, he made a spreadsheet before buying his first used car. Paul used to joke that Mark had been born 40 years old. That Saturday, we started in the hall closet. Old coats first, then shoes. An umbrella with a broken handle. 3 scarves I hadn't worn in years. At first it felt good. Mark would hold something up. Keep? I would think for a moment. Donate. Into the box it went. There was something satisfying about hearing the cardboard fill. A little less weight, a little less clutter. But Mark moved quickly. Too quickly for me. He could decide in 3 seconds what sometimes took me a full minute. "Mom, You haven't worn this in 10 years. I know. So donate? Maybe. He would wait. I hated making him wait. Mark had a wife, a job, 2 teenagers, and his own house to worry about. I knew Saturday mornings were valuable. So after a few seconds, I would say, "Fine," or "Whatever you think." I didn't notice how often I said that. Not yet. After I confronted him about Paul's books, Mark apologized again that evening. He called while I was making soup. "I really didn't mean to upset you." "I know. I just figured we'd already agreed to clear things out." "We agreed to clear things out. We did not agree that you could decide what goes." "I wasn't taking anything for myself." "I know that. I was trying to help." There it was. Trying to help. 3 words that made almost any objection sound ungrateful. "I know you're trying to help," I said. "Then trust me a little." I didn't answer. That Saturday, he came back with more boxes. This time, he brought packing tape, labels, and a small folding hand truck. I stood in the driveway, watching him unload everything. "You planning to move me out by dinner?" He laughed. Very funny. Then he looked toward the upstairs windows. "We should probably do the guest room next." The guest room had not been a guest room for years. Not really. There was a bed, but nobody had slept there since my sister visited almost 3 Christmases ago. Paul's old reading chair sat by the window. There was a narrow bookcase, 2 lamps, and a small table with a drawer that stuck every summer when the humidity came in. Mark climbed the stairs ahead of me. Halfway up, he turned. "Careful. I have been climbing these stairs longer than you've been alive." He smiled. "I know." But he slowed down anyway. That was another thing I had started noticing. People slowing down around me. Holding doors longer. Reaching for grocery bags before I asked. Speaking slightly louder. My doctor once handed a printed instruction sheet to Mark instead of me. Neither of us said anything. Most of it came from kindness. That is what makes certain changes difficult to resent. We started with the closet. An old suitcase. Extra blankets. A box of school supplies I had saved from my teaching years. I opened that one myself. Construction paper. Old reward stickers. A stack of laminated reading cards. Mark held up a bag of plastic letters. "Mom, I know. You retired 12 years ago." "I know." He waited. I ran my fingers over the bag. I remembered children sitting cross-legged on the carpet. I remembered one little boy named Anthony who struggled to read the word home for almost a month. The day he finally got it, he shouted so loudly the teacher next door came in. Those plastic letters had nothing to do with Anthony. Not really. They were just plastic. I smiled. "Donate them." Mark dropped them into the box. Then he picked up a coffee mug from the small table near the window. White ceramic. A faded red stripe around the top. Paul used to drink from it every morning. The handle had been glued once. Mark looked at it. "Trash?" Something in me tightened. "No." He glanced at the crack. "It leaks." "I know. So what are you keeping it for?" I took it from his hand. I said no. Mark went quiet. I carried the mug downstairs and put it in the kitchen cabinet. I didn't even use it. That wasn't the point. At least, I didn't think it was. A few days later, my friend Linda stopped by. Linda and I worked together at Madison Elementary for 23 years. She ran the front office, which meant she knew every child's allergy, every parent's divorce, and every teacher who cried in the supply closet. Retirement had not changed her much. She still noticed everything. We sat at my kitchen table with tea. I told her about the books, then the mug, then Mark's boxes. Linda listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stirred honey into her cup. "Why does he think he can decide?" I shrugged. "Because he's trying to help." That wasn't what I asked. I looked at her. She leaned back. "Why does he think the decision is his?" I started defending Mark. "He's busy. He drives all the way over here, He knows how to organize things. Linda nodded. And? And what? Why do you keep saying he knows best? I don't. She raised one eyebrow. I hated when she did that. Yes, you do. I do not. Helen, you have said whatever Mark thinks 3 times since I got here. I laughed. It wasn't really funny. He knows more about houses than I do. About houses, maybe. She lifted her cup. Not about being you. That stayed with me after she left. For the next few days, I started hearing myself. Mark called about a plumber. Whatever you think. He suggested replacing the back steps. Whatever you think. He asked whether I wanted to move some furniture downstairs eventually. Whatever you think. It had become a habit. I could not remember when it started. Maybe after Paul died. Paul and I made decisions together for 51 years. Not every decision. I chose curtains. He chose lawn equipment. I handled school matters when Mark was young. Paul handled the car. But big things belonged to both of us. After he died, every decision suddenly came to me alone. Roof repair, taxes, insurance, the furnace, what to keep, what to sell, what to do with his clothes. At first, people praised me for being strong. What nobody tells you about being strong is how tiring it becomes when nobody else is standing beside you. So when Mark started saying, "I'll handle it," I let him. It felt like relief, until relief, slowly, became something else. The following Saturday, I heard the truck before Mark knocked. I was upstairs folding towels. When I came into the guest room, Paul's chair was gone. For 1 second, I honestly thought I was confused. The space by the window looked enormous. Too clean. I walked downstairs. Mark was in the driveway, tightening a strap across the back of his truck. The chair was sitting there. Mark. He looked up. What? Why is that chair in your truck? He glanced at it. The upholstery's worn out. I thought we'd take it with the donation run. Put it back. He stopped moving. Mom, put it back. Nobody sits in it. I sit in it. He looked surprised. Since when? That doesn't matter. It kind of does. No, it doesn't. He rubbed his forehead. Mom, this is exactly what makes this hard. You say you want to clear things out, but every object turns into a debate. Then we'll debate. He stared at me. I rarely raised my voice. I didn't raise it then either. But something in my tone must have changed. Mark loosened the strap. Together, we carried the chair back upstairs. He set it near the window. Then he stood beside it with his hands on his hips. Why does this one matter so much? I looked at the chair. The arms were scratched. The cushions sagged slightly on the left. Paul had sat there every Sunday morning reading the newspaper. He would pretend not to listen when I talked from the hallway. Then 15 minutes later, he would repeat something I had said. Once, during a snowstorm, we spent almost an entire Sunday in that room. Paul in the chair, me on the bed. No electricity for 6 hours. We ate crackers and peanut butter because neither of us wanted to open the refrigerator. I almost told Mark all of that. Instead, I said, because I'm not ready. His expression softened. All right. He went downstairs. I sat in the chair after he left. The room was very quiet. For a while, I felt justified. Then I looked around. There were things everywhere. Boxes, old lamps, clothes nobody wore, books nobody opened, a television set that had not worked since before Paul died. And I had an uncomfortable thought. Mark was wrong to decide for me. But he wasn't wrong about everything. That frightened me more than anger had, because anger had given me a simple story. My son was pushing too hard. I needed to stop him. But sitting there in Paul's chair, I realized something else. I didn't actually want to keep the whole house frozen. Some of it wasn't memory. Some of it was avoidance. There were boxes I had not opened, because opening them meant choosing. There were drawers I had left untouched because Paul had been the last person to close them. I had been calling all of it sentimental. Maybe some of it was fear. The next morning, I took one box into the dining room. No Mark, no Linda, just me. Inside were things from an old kitchen drawer, expired coupons, 3 bottle openers, takeout menus from restaurants that had closed, a little ceramic spoon rest with a chip along the side. I picked each thing up. I made myself decide. Trash. Trash. Keep. Donate. Trash. It took almost an hour. At the bottom was a red pot holder Paul hated because it was too thin. I laughed out loud when I saw it. For years, he complained that it was an oven burn waiting to happen. I held it for a moment. Then I put it in the trash. That surprised me. I waited for regret. None came. Instead, I felt lighter. That afternoon, I filled another box, then another. I donated 2 winter coats, an unused bread maker, old serving dishes, nearly all the teaching supplies. I found a stack of birthday cards from people whose faces I could barely remember. Those went too. I kept Paul's mug. I kept the chair. I kept one of his flannel shirts. The difference was simple. I had chosen. Over the next week, I started looking at the house differently. Not as a museum, not as a burden. As a series of decisions I had postponed. Some were easy, some hurt, some surprised me. I found a box of Mark's childhood trophies in the basement. I called him. "Do you want these?" He laughed. "Absolutely not. You won 3rd place in a soccer tournament when I was 11. It seemed important at the time. Throw them out." I smiled. "That's my decision." He paused, then laughed again. "Fair enough." For a moment, things felt better. Then the next Saturday came. Mark arrived with his truck, already half full of boxes from my garage. I stood on the porch, watching him lift another one. "What is that?" "Kitchen stuff." "Did we go through it?" He hesitated. Mostly. Mostly? "Mom, it's duplicate stuff. Old pans. Containers without lids. Unload the truck." He looked at me. "Come on. Unload it. We already sorted this." "You sorted it." "We talked about this." "Yes, we did." "Then what are we doing?" "I'm asking you to unload my things." He stared at me for several seconds. "I don't understand why you're making this so difficult." There it was. Difficult. For years, I had tried very hard not to be difficult. Easy mother, easy widow, easy older woman. I didn't want Mark worrying. I didn't want him rearranging work because of me. I didn't want to become one of those mothers who called every day about small things. So I had made myself easy. And Mark had learned from me. I walked down the porch steps. "I know you're trying to help." "I am. But helping me doesn't mean finishing the job faster than I can live through it." His face changed slightly. He looked tired, not angry, just tired. Then he said, "Do you know what I see when I come here?" I waited. "I see loose steps. I see boxes stacked where you could trip. I see a house you can't keep up with anymore." That hurt. He continued, "And every time I leave, I wonder if I'm going to get a call saying something happened." I had never heard him say that before. "I watched you after Dad died," he said. "You barely ate for weeks. You stopped opening mail. I came over and you told me to handle everything." "I know." "So I did." "Yes. And now I'm supposed to know which things you want me to handle and which things you don't." I looked at the boxes in his truck. For the first time, I understood how confusing I must have been. I had spent years saying, "You decide." Then I became angry when he did. That didn't make his choices right. But it made our pattern clearer. "I think I made this too easy for you," I said. Mark frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I stopped making decisions because I was tired." He didn't say anything. "And You got used to making them. He looked down. Probably. That single word changed the whole conversation. Not because it solved anything, because neither of us had to be the villain anymore. I touched the side of one box. I do need to clear this house out. Mark looked surprised. You do? Yes, but not like this. He nodded slowly. What do you want to do? That question felt almost unfamiliar. I thought about it. Then I said, give me 6 months. For what? To go through the house myself. He started to object. I raised my hand. You can help me carry things. You can take donations. You can fix the steps. But I decide what leaves. Mark looked toward the house. And after 6 months, I'll decide that then too. He smiled a little. Fair enough. Then he began unloading the truck. Every box. Even the one filled with plastic containers that probably deserved to be thrown away. That was 4 months ago. The house already looks different. There are fewer boxes in the basement. The hallway closet closes without me leaning against the door. The guest room is cleaner. I gave away most of the books nobody had opened in years. I sold an old dresser to a young couple moving into their first apartment. The woman ran her hand across the top and said it was exactly what she'd been looking for. I liked that. Something leaving my life could enter someone else's. Not everything had to feel like loss. Mark fixed the back steps. He replaced the loose railing. I let him decide which screws to use. There are some decisions I am very happy not to make. We laugh about that now. Not everything became perfect. Sometimes Mark still moves too fast. Sometimes I still say, whatever you think, before catching myself. Then I stop. I ask myself whether I truly don't care or whether I'm avoiding a decision. Those are different things, and Paul's woodworking books are still gone. I wish I had them back. Some losses stay losses, but I don't blame Mark every time I think about them anymore. I understand how we got there. Last Saturday, we cleared the cabinet in the dining room. Mark picked up an old glass pitcher. He looked at me. Then he asked, "Keep?" I turned it over in my hands. Paul and I received it as a wedding gift. For years, I thought that made it important. But standing there, I couldn't remember the last time I used it. I remembered the woman who gave it to us, my Aunt Margaret. She died more than 20 years ago. For a moment, I thought keeping the pitcher meant keeping some piece of her. Then I realized I already remembered her. The pitcher wasn't doing the remembering for me. "Donate," I said. Mark put it in the box. No argument. No explanation. Just my decision. Paul's chair is still upstairs. I sit there sometimes. The fabric is more worn now. Mark offered to have it reupholstered. I told him I would think about it. He didn't call anyone. He didn't take measurements. He simply said, "Let me know." That may sound like a very small thing. At 76, I have learned that some of the most important changes arrive quietly, not with speeches, not with apologies that fix everything. Sometimes change sounds like someone asking, "What do you want?" and then waiting long enough to hear the answer. Maybe one day I'll let the chair go too. Maybe I won't. What matters to me now is that I understand the difference. There are things we release because our lives have changed, and there are things taken from us because someone else decided we no longer needed them. Those two experiences may look identical from the outside. They do not feel identical inside. Getting older has already taken choices from me. I don't move as quickly as I used to. My hands aren't as strong. I pay someone to trim the hedges now. Mark carries the heavy boxes. I need help with things I once handled alone. There is no dignity in pretending otherwise. But needing help does not mean handing over every decision. And letting go does not have to mean disappearing. For a long time, I thought independence meant doing everything myself. Then Paul died, and I learned how exhausting that definition could be. Now I think independence is something quieter. It is knowing where you need help, knowing where you don't, and being able to tell the difference. It is letting someone carry the box while you decide what belongs inside it. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you for listening. Maybe you're going through something similar. Maybe someone you love has started helping a little too much. Or maybe you're the person trying to help, and you're afraid of what might happen if you don't. Either way, I hope you remember this. Help matters. So does choice. If this story reminded you of something in your own life, I'd be glad to hear about it in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories about aging, family, and the lessons we sometimes learn later than expected, please consider liking the video and subscribing. I'll see you in the next story.